and Robbo.
Streaming across the globe, Ben Norris, Rob McKnight, and David Robinson.
Ben, Rob and Robbo. News, reviews, entertainment too. It's the Ben, Rob and Robbo. Ben, Rob and Robbo Show. Ben, Rob and Robbo Show.
Welcome to the Ben, Rob and Robbo Show. Here's Rob McKnight.
Hello there and welcome to Tuesday afternoon for the Ben, Rob and Robbo Show. I'm joined by some fabulous people. No jokes, I really am. It's Ben and Robbo. Hello, boys.
Hello.
You look fabulous today. What's
you.
going on? Your lighting looks amazing. I can see your hairline. And if I get bored talking to you, I can watch Seinfeld in the background.
On the orders of Carlotta, I have a bit of backlight now, so which she's absolutely right. I just had to order it in, so we now have backlight. Huzzah! I do have hair. What's left of it?
Yeah.
Robbo, you made a surprise appearance on the TV Black Box podcast this morning.
I did. I was very excited to be there. I've always wanted to go on that podcast since it began, and finally I got my wish last night, and what a night it was. We can't say too much, obviously, Rob, so you're going to have to hear the explosive bombshell that I dropped by listening to the podcast.
Indeed, and you can just search for TV Black Box in your podcast feed, and we would appreciate it. All right, let's move on to today's topics in a moment, but first let me tell you who's coming up. We've got the fabulous Mark Vanel coming up. This guy is amazing. He hosts the feed for SBS, but he's done so many projects that have just gone viral around the world. One documentary he made has been viewed over 6 million times on YouTube. Just absolutely extraordinary. So I can't wait to chat with him. We'll get some advice on how to produce content and how to make your content compelling. So that'll be really interesting. As we talk about the China tariffs too, we'll also be talking to Sam Dastyari as we cut through the political spin in our usual Tuesday politics chat with Sam. But talking about China, the payback begins. China has imposed an 80% tariff on Australian barley that will last 5 years. The communist state denies this is in retaliation after Australia demanded an investigation into COVID-19. At first, China said no to the probe, but has since come around after over 100 countries pressured President Xi Jinping. Robbo, should we be surprised?
Look, we really shouldn't. This is a communist state. They're totalitarianism form of government. They like to control what happens. They like to control their message. But in this globalized world, that's just not possible, especially when you've got something to do with a global pandemic. Now, the difference is, though, Australia, I understand, has dropped that kind of investigation idea to it. They're not going to see if the Chinese government was culpable or not. It has now moved to, well, how can we stop it from happening in the future?
So we have
softened our stance. Well, we've softened our stance a little bit, but there does need to be diplomacy here. What Donald Trump is doing is not helpful, is not going to work, and is only going to push information underground even further. So I don't think we've rolled over. I just think that we're being mature about it, as opposed tit for tat thing that America is doing with China, which just
look. I'm not after a tit
it doesn't
for tat
work.
thing. What I'm after are answers.
Yes, but but we've got to understand that the ball game that we're playing, we've got to understand the rules of that. They are going to be very cagey. They've only been doing this, as you mentioned in your intro there, because they've been forced by 100 countries or more. They've committed $2 billion to the investigation, but it is now just an investigation into how we can deal with these better next time, not so much in the Chinese government's response to it.
Ben, what do you think? Yesterday or last week, we've been talking about the fact, how far should we go to placate China? It now seems that if we're not asking for an investigation against the Chinese government, that we are softening, at the very least, if you don't want to say we rolled over. At what point do we put economics before the truth, or the truth before economics? Which way should it be?
Well, I think my concern with all of this is we have to be really sensitive about our relationships with China. And as we can see that there already has been some effects, but with the media, there's a few, drastic headlines out there about our relationship with China and what's the response and are they doing this and are they doing that? I'd just be really careful about, trying to get a headline out of something like this without necessarily knowing all the facts. Look, if China has said that their new contract in relation to the barley export is for this particular reason. I think we should just believe that for the time being and leave it to the government to
Call
sort it
me a
out.
skeptic. I'm sorry. I don't believe it for one stinking moment. This is payback, pure and simple. We are being penalised for standing up and making noise.
Yeah, I know. I guess I could see where you're coming from, but if we start using language like that, it seems like we're trying to go into war with them. Like, shouldn't we just be just a little bit sensitive and try and meet halfway? I don't necessarily think we need to go, hey, we see what you're doing, that means this, and now we're going to go you, because I think that's where trouble gets stirred up.
Sure, and it comes back to that, Robbo, what the economic impact is and how far we go with this. I don't know. I don't have a hard line on this, but I don't like being bullied into submission.
Well, I guess we've got to make that choice, don't we? What do we want to do? Do we want to save potentially thousands and millions of lives in the future by working out what to do with the pandemic? Or do we want to sit China down and said, naughty, and you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that, and you should have done this quicker? You've got to choose between it. What does it achieve by, waving the finger at China? Probably not a lot. But what does it do if we can just have a frank, impartial discussion as a global community about what to do next time something like this happens, as opposed to waving fingers? What it will turn into, it'll turn into a witch hunt. Donald Trump is already kind of putting his position out there as to how he would do this. He's already discredited the WHO the same way that he discredits the news media by calling it fake news.
This is not about Donald Trump. This is about Australia's relationship with China. And we've already had a situation where the Chinese government won't return the calls of a senior minister in the Morrison government.
Oh, Bob, you love the drama. You love the drama. That's what I see. I wholeheartedly agree with Robbo, and I reckon that 99% of other people watching this right now will agree with Robbo as well. You are pulling apart the plot details on Home and Away and saying that, Irene is responsible for Alf's death or whatever it is without it actually happening. So I just would be careful before speculating too hard on something that would be catastrophic if that relationship was damaged.
Well, look, there's two things here. I would love to know what the people watching right now have to say about this. So please, on Twitter, use the hashtag BRR show. And on Facebook, go to the Ben, Rob and Robbo Facebook page, because that's where we're drawing the comments in on Facebook today. So go to facebook.com/BRR show and put your comments underneath today's video. All right, let's move on. And we'll have Sam Dastiari coming up, and I'm fascinated for his take on the China thing. All right, no jab, no play has taken on a whole new meaning within the AFL today. The code has introduced new rules that state players can only sleep with someone that they're in an intimate relationship with, which means that casual, random sex is off the table. The new rules are part of the game's plan to be COVID safe. Ben, is this fair, and can it work?
Oh, well, it's probably fair because they're trying to do the right thing by the health of them. I mean, they're trying to get the risks of COVID-19 down. But footballers are sluts. How are they going to stop these footballers from having sex with all these people? It's outrageous. I once worked at a hotel, and the hotel was looking after an AFL team who was in the grand final. And that night I was working room service, and I went up to the room. I got to know throughout the season the wives of the football players. And the night that they won, I was delivering room service. I was doing a double shift, and I got to see some footballers with some very different looking wives that night. And I would say that footballers get away, and they want to get away with it, and they do get away with it. And I think, how are they going to go around and police this? It just seems like an impossible thing to try and police.
Look, Robbo, back in the day, cricketers were banned from having nookie the night before because they said it affected their game and they wanted them on edge. Do you think... I just don't know about this. How can you police it, as Ben said? And I just cannot get over the Ben saying they're sluts. If footballers... do you ever know of a footballer to follow the rules?
Not really, but I want to take this opportunity, obviously, to send our thoughts and prayers to those footballers with this mocking ban. They've been holed up with their real wives and their children for months. It's sad for them that they won't be able to go out and have an orgy or have casual random sex. Thoughts and prayers, boys. The same thing, I'm going to have the same line that I had for when we were talking about whether they would get the flu shot or not. It's fine. If you can't give up your casual sex, that's fine. You don't get paid and you don't play. Move on. Got no time.
I agree
with that. I agree with
I
that.
do agree with this, but can I just quickly ask the two of you a quick question? None of us look like footballers, but if we had the body oddy and looked stunning, do you reckon that you two would be sluts, or do you think that you'd be, living like hermits?
I do have the body. What are you talking about?
Come on, boys, let's be real.
Yeah.
If you guys look like footballers with the body oddy, do you think that you'd be at home with your body locked away, or do you think you'd be out getting it going
Look,
on?
Ben, they still have options. They can still do their bubblers and all that kind of stuff, like all the crap that footballers get up to. They just can't sleep with women they don't know. And that's not really an unfair thing during a pandemic.
Neither of you going to answer the question that if you guys looked amazing, that you wouldn't be sluts.
Time. You're really going after this question.
I want to know.
I've been a slut before, even with this body. So
I love it. I love it. And you know what? I've got a lot of friends that hit me up about you, and they say that you're very attractive. And if you want some phone numbers, I'm happy to give them to you, men and women.
They're not seeing the shot further down. I'll tell you that for free. Just really quickly, back on policing it. Darren Hinch was on Sunrise this morning saying, how can you police it? I don't think it's the thing about policing. Obviously, I take Ben's point. He's exactly right. But it's more about can you boys try and do the right thing? What will happen? It'll be a reactive kind of punishment. So if a player gets COVID-19, there'll be a little investigation. A few boys saw you with this woman. Who was she? And then that will happen, and then they can be fined under that. So it's not about having someone in the closet or someone through the peephole. It's just about, boys, please, for goodness sake, keep it in your pants. It's not worth it just until we get through COVID-19. We want to get the game back on the field.
If they're in a relationship, let's remember that.
Yeah.
Well, that's discrimination. Yeah. That's unfair. Just because someone's in a relationship shouldn't mean that we stop them from being able to do what's natural.
No, I'm sorry. It's about risk, Ben. It's about risk. And we are in a pandemic, and they're trying to get the codes back on the field. And if they want to play and if they want to get paid, as Robbo said, they have to follow the rules. Well, look,
they're going to have to make nice with their hands.
The coronavirus continues to cause confusion and send mixed messages. While the New South Wales government has issued strict social distancing rules, bus drivers have been told not to enforce them. The Sydney Morning Herald reports that there is a fear that disgruntled passengers may take out their frustrations on frontline staff. Okay, Robbo, shouldn't it be enforced? Otherwise, what are we doing? We're guaranteeing a second wave to be more severe.
Isn't this a sad state of affairs when basically the reason that they're saying to the drivers don't enforce it is because of abuse from passengers?
Yeah.
So
100%.
they are expecting that very aggressive, disgruntled passengers will take it out on the drivers. The drivers aren't trained for that. It's not their job either. They shouldn't be trained for it. So I think it's just one of those awful things where you can't police that. That's really tough, because of just a small band of people who will take it out on the poor driver. They're trying to do their best there. Obviously, especially in New South Wales, there, as we're talking, there's stickers on the seats, which should tell people where to sit and things like that. But if you've ever spent maybe even 2 minutes in Sydney, Sydney people like to do what Sydney people like to do because they're from Sydney and they're the best in the world. So that actually creates this issue. And this is true. It creates this kind of arrogance issue of I will sit there if I want to. I paid for a ticket. I will do this. And that's stress that the drivers don't need to experience.
There's a really interesting one here, Robbo, though. The idea of leaving kids at bus stops if the bus is over full. And the first thought that sprung into my mind was Daniel Morecambe. The bus didn't pick him up, and look what happened. I don't think... So what is the balance between the threat of something devastating like that happening and trying to protect everyone from COVID-19?
So that's one of the very first rules that they've said, that no child can be left at a bus stop under any circumstances. So if you're over capacity of a bus, that child gets on that bus. So the government was very clear on making sure that rule was one of the only that they adhere to. Kids must be picked up. There's no question, which is great because obviously, as you mentioned, the first thing that pops into everyone's head is a bus drive past a bus stop and there's Daniel Morecambe rather. That at least that rule will be enforced by the drivers.
Okay. Ben, what is interesting, though, is we have a situation again where our leaders can't lead. The government of New South Wales have said, these are the rules. And straight away, another bureaucrat or another boss has said, no, we're not following those rules. Rules are put there for a reason. And if people are worried about bus drivers copying it, maybe they need to put security on or something. I know that's not a great solution. I know they shouldn't have to cop it. But the fact is, we are trying to stop a second wave of this pandemic coming. Everyone wants to get back to normality. But there are ways we need to do that, isn't there? Or do you think it's fair enough?
Well, I think it's really difficult because, I mean, these people are trying to do their job, which is to drive a bus. They're not supposed to be security guards. And like, I know for myself, when it came to starting this show, I thought I was a TV presenter. And the next thing I know, I'm a technician, I'm a sound operator, I'm a script writer, and I have to do all these other things. And,
Did I not tell you about all that, mate?
But we have to, well, I think, fair enough. And, we have to kind of meet halfway, I guess. It is a fairly big thing to ask them to start trying to police people on these buses. I think that they need to be suggestive, but if people start to act violently or are they being aggressive, I think you're just going to try and have to leave that. But also just finishing on this, like the Titanic, women and children first. And so I think they get to go on the bus first. I mean, they don't want to end the same way the Titanic did, but I think, they need to have that priority.
Look, it is an easy thing to say, but of course, people stuck in a line, desperate to get to work, who are going to be late, they do get tetchy, and it's a really difficult situation, but we are in a pandemic and we need to follow the rules. Well, the recent closures of BuzzFeed Australia and the axing of 10 Daily, as we brought to you yesterday, has once again brought attention to the dire state of the Australian media. Since January 2019, almost 200 newsrooms have closed across the country, putting hundreds of people out of work. From the Sydney Morning Herald and News Corp to all three of the commercial networks, no media has been safe from the downturn in advertising dollars. Robbo, is there a solution to this?
It's really tough, isn't it? One of the first solutions I would think of is there needs to be legislation against Google and Apple and all of those kind of big tech players who grab all the news, put it on their sites, and there's no kickback. We've got to remember this is a two-pronged problem as well. A, they don't pay enough tax, which is outrageous. So when people start saying things like, oh, we can't afford to pay for that program, or we can't afford to do this, oh, how about we start taxing those massive corporations who are also not paying tax, they're not paying for the news that they get, they're devaluing our news, and we're seeing these massive closures around the country. I was really lucky enough to work for the ABC in Bunbury, and when you're in a small kind of city, regional city like that, it's very important to have local media to scrutinise the local councils. We're not talking about scrutinising federal governments or state governments. You're talking about scrutinising that local council, those local businesses, those local issues, and you need to have a voice there, because what happens when the light shines away from it? The great tagline of the Washington Post is democracy dies in darkness. And I think that is such a great way to show things, because there are many councils that need to be held to scrutiny, in fact, all of them. To lose all of these, these journos, and especially AAP is going to be closing soon. It's really, really tough stuff. But I really think one of the first solutions is to start charging Google and Facebook.
And look, there's a whole investigation going on to that at the moment, and the ACCC has handed down some preliminary reporting on that. There's still a long way to go. And local voice is important. If, funnily enough, 2KY in Albury-Wodonga was facing the closure of its breakfast market that was going to be networked from another region. There was such a backlash, they've had to reinstate. This is just happened in the last week. They've had to reinstate that breakfast show and stop the networking from coming in because the backlash was so great, because this is one of the oldest radio stations in the country, and they were facing the closure of breakfast news and the breakfast show. So a great result that's been saved. Kevin Kiley down there does the breakfast show, and they were going to be moved to afternoon slots. So they now get to keep their jobs in the breakfast show, and the people of Albury-Wodonga get to keep listening to a local voice. But Ben, I think there also needs to be some understanding that when it comes to subscribing to news, people don't want to do that so much because it costs money, and there has been an expectation that we get news for free.
Yeah, I think I was living in central Queensland because I was working on a breakfast radio show there, and I got to see how important it is to be able to have your own localised news. But I was there during a time where the newspaper started to enforce subscription, and it made a huge impact on the newspaper and the amount of people that were getting it. So, look, I think it's a really difficult situation. I think news in regional areas is very important and we need to protect that. And I can understand why some people probably feel like they can't afford it or won't pay for it.
So, yeah, I agree. So I think you can't change the market. So the people expect to get news for free. That's how we've always done it. So that's fine. You're not going to change that. What you can do, and I don't want to harp on about this, but I'm about to, charge Google and Facebook. And rightly so, Rob, you mentioned that investigation, which is really powerful and really, really important because they earn squillions of money. And we're talking about, paying a regional journo 60 grand a year, and they're talking about billions and billions of dollars worth of profit. They need to start paying for it. 9, 7, 10, ABC, SMH, all of that kind of thing can still provide it the way that they want to, whether it's behind a paywall or free. But there needs to be charging of that because Google and Facebook are the people who have moved that news far away from those sources, so the sources don't get the money.
There is a little bit
Someone's winning and it's not
about that. Google basically posts links to article. They don't post the whole article. So I'm there's part of this I still don't get that. Actually, you know what? We'll get an expert in to talk us through this because it's really important legislation. It's really important that we understand the implications of it. So maybe on Thursday we'll get someone in to talk us through it. All right. It's the kiss that Nine Network's Tony Jones wishes we'd all forget. It happened at the end of Beck Jugg's final weather broadcast. And a warning, this is very awkward.
It's time that we'll be working together for a little while because you're off on a break.
Hello.
Yes, Tony. Giving birth to those twins of yours. We'll all miss you, but of course everyone in the newsroom sends much love and very best wishes.
Thank you. I'll miss you all too. Wish me luck. I'm going to need it.
Yeah, well, I tell you, the Carlton supporters are very excited.
Well, they should be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like Nick.
Ooh.
Okay, good. This is going well.
You're funny. All right, now, Melbourne, that's what's news this Monday. Enjoy your evening and good night.
Yeah.
To this day, I still don't understand that. In an interview with 3AW's Neil Mitchell, Jones said that if he sees the clip again, he'll walk off set. She threw him under a bus, and whatever you think of Tony Jones, he's got lovers and haters. That was a really weird moment for her just to turn away. But let's talk about this. Ben, do you have a moment you'd rather forget?
Oh, pretty much every conversation I've had with Robbo on this show so far. I think sometimes I come across...
That's hurtful.
I think sometimes I think sometimes I come across a little bit like a bull in a china shop, and I try to get my opinions across. And last week I said, use your brain. And I probably should have used my brain and used a different term to get my point across. So that's my regret.
Okay. What about you, Robbo?
You don't have to worry about that. Look, I've been trying really hard to think. It's one of those things that there are 1,400 billion of them, and I can't think of one because there's so many. Yes. But I've said a lot of things. I think we kind of touched on this kind of subject before. Whenever you're speaking publicly, you're always on edge, worrying about what you're going to say. We're trying to kind of, get rid of that on this show, which I think we're doing quite well. So, I'm not sure. But, Rob, what about you?
Probably one of the very first episodes where I accidentally showed my stomach.
Oh, no, that was great. That made Robbo and I feel so much better about it.
That's on a lot of websites now, Rob.
All right, let's move on. And it is... Sorry, what have I missed? Robbo, you were laughing like a Cheshire cat then.
No, now I'm going to get in trouble for it. Ben was saying that when you showed your torso, that it made us feel better about ourselves.
Yeah, I
that
heard
was Ben's
that.
comment, not mine.
I've been fired.
Okay,
I've been fired on live streaming.
We're recasting.
No, unless we can find another Ben. It's all in the logo.
Another Ben, that's right.
Oh, is that all it's going to take? Okay, fair enough.
No,
all right.
We love you, Benny.
It's time to get serious. Let's cross to the Ticker newsroom and get the latest news that's happening around the world. Hello, Aaron Young in the Ticker newsroom. What's happening today?
Yes, let's have a look at the news headlines. The Chinese embassy in Canberra has labelled the Morrison government's claims of success in securing a global review into coronavirus nothing but a joke. A spokesman for the embassy has told the ABC today there will be no independent international review, as Australia had wanted, because the investigation will be led by the WHO. A 93-year-old woman has become Australia's 100th coronavirus death. The woman was a resident at the troubled Newmarch House Aged Care Centre, making her the 17th resident to die of coronavirus at the facility. One of the first coronavirus vaccines to be tested in humans has been proven to be safe, with hopes it could now be available by the end of the year. 8 healthy volunteers were given 2 doses of the vaccine from March. The vaccine produced virus-fighting antibodies that were similar or better than those found in patients who'd actually recovered. And will Virgin Australia run out of money before it's sold? Deloitte admitting the airline only has enough cash on hand to get through the sale process as concerns grow over the struggling airline's immediate liquidity. The Big Four firm also defending its processes as Virgin because Canada's Brookfield Asset Management has now withdrawn from the sale, blaming the tight timeline. And if you're flying Qantas, you will be taking part in the Fly Well program because there'll be a number of temporary measures rolled out to keep both passengers and crew safe while in the air. From the 12th of June, the airline will issue passengers with masks on board, have hand sanitizer stations installed at departure gates, and also there'll be a lot more cleaning between flights. Check the weather map now. Melbourne, cloudy outside, bit of sun poking through, 19 degrees. Sydney, 22 degrees. Brisbane, 24 degrees. Sunshine for Perth and 19. And overcast for Adelaide and 21. Let's have a look at the market. It's been a fair bit of good news. Look at that, straight off the top. It went up 1% and then up to 1.7%. Has not quite reached what we saw on the Dow overnight. Wall Street was in fact over 2% and in fact over 3%, but also over 900 points up, which is good news for investors and perhaps a sign that things might be on the improve. That's it from Ticker. Back to the gentleman around the country.
Robbo, you wanted to ask Aaron something.
I do want to ask Aaron something. Aaron, very excitedly, we saw the promo this morning for Ticker Jumpstart. This is a question without notice. Is there any way we can see that quickly now, or is I don't know. Is that bad to do that?
Yes, I believe we should be able to do that. If we head to our break section, just giving some directions to the director.
Hey, good morning. Ticker's new breakfast show.
Well, most of the time in the morning, I annoy people.
I think Ben is so fabulous. He is wild, he is warm, he is witty.
The first time I met Alana, I realised I wanted to have a drink with her.
You never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
Kick off your morning with Ticker Jumpstart.
We are playing in uncharted territory.
This preparation takes me all night.
It doesn't matter how long I take, because Ben will always take longer.
Ticker Jumpstart with Benjamin Norris and Alana McLean.
You're going to get some different stuff with us, and we're going to be unapologetic for it.
You do realise it's the morning, so you don't need to be the human coffee.
There you have it. Alana
great.
sitting just
Very
behind
good.
me.
Congratulations.
There she is, bit of a wave.
Hi, Lana.
Hi, babe. You're all good.
Carry
Well
on,
done.
gents.
Congratulations. We're
Yeah,
very excited.
congratulations and good choice bringing Ben into the fold for Ticker TV. He'll do great with Alana in the morning, so can't wait to see it. It launches June 1, I believe, at 7 a.m. Or am I just
Yes,
making
June
things
1,
up?
7 a.m. I'm actually making myself redundant since we launched Ticker. I've been doing the 8 a.m. hour for Ticker today, and we kind of got to the stage where it was time to maybe have a bit lighter morning. I guess what we wanted to do at Ticker is to be something where you could get your news on your way in, be a little bit different. We always talk about being different, and as you saw in the promo there, it's all about personality. It's about two people who get on really well. And Ben, I think you'll agree we had a hell of a lot of fun shooting it.
Yeah, we did. But you know what? I'm always just so impressed with how efficient you are. I think that's the only time I've ever shot a promo for a TV show, and it was done in under an hour. I will say one thing.
Well,
I think
remember,
my nose
we did
might
it
be
on this
leaking in one
phone.
of
We
the
did it on the
shots.
mobile phone.
You've never been on one of
I
my
know.
promo
Yes.
shoots.
Yeah, very slick. But I texted Alana yesterday and said, I wish that you'd come over with a hanky and blown my nose, because I think my nose might have been leaking in one of those shots. But you know what? It's hilarious, and I can't wait to start on the 1st of June. But I will bring my own handkerchief.
We look forward to it. Thank you,
We'll have
Aaron.
tissues. Yeah.
We'll see you tomorrow.
All right, thanks, guys.
Okay, it's time for a hit of entertainment, and for that we cross to our good friend Ben.
And for anyone who's been watching MasterChef, they would have seen that one of the fan favourites, Ben Ungerman, had been removed from the competition around the time that Katy Perry turned up. No one was actually too sure what the reasons were. But it has now come out today that he has been he hasn't been charged. He's been charged with 2 counts of sex offences. So unfortunately for him, he did come to an end with his time on MasterChef, and he hasn't actually been officially charged, I don't believe, yet. So I think we'll get more from that story. But look, I think at the end of the day, Channel 10 has made the right decision with removing him from the competition while they sort this out. Also making news is Katy Perry. Now, Katy Perry, who I really love because she's really open and honest about how she feels. She was talking to a UK breakfast show and she opened up about some mental health issues while being an ISO, which I think is incredibly relatable. We've got a clip of Katy right now.
I cry when just doing simple tasks, you know? And I also think a lot of that is probably hormonal. And, you know, I'm not used to being around so many people all in a confined space for so long. I'm used to kind of like going all the time. I like my own kind of alone time, and there's not really anywhere to go for that besides my car. I go to my car a lot.
Well, Katy Perry's always been very relatable, if you ask me, and it was quite good for her to open up and talk about her mental health issues while she has been in ISO. But, you know, obviously she had prepared to release an album this year, which she has put on hold. And I think, you know, she's got a lot on her plate. She's got a baby daughter on the way. Not going too far from talking about Katy Perry. Katy Perry, a couple of days ago, launched her new song, Daisies, on American Idol. And we have got a clip of her time on American Idol with that.
I'm a small town, 1 in 7 billion. Why can't it be me? They told me I was out there, tried to knock me down. Took those sticks and stones, showed them I could build a house. They tell me that I'm crazy, but I'll never let them change me. So they cover me in daisies, daisies, daisies. They said I'm going nowhere, try to cut me out. Took those sticks and stones, showed them I could build a house. Tell me that I'm crazy, but I'll never let them change me. So they cover me in daisies.
Ben, that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. Rob, you were the one that brought that to my attention this morning. Can I tell you that this was all done on a live stage show, so it's quite phenomenal that with the technology that they have these days to be able to come up with such an amazing... This could have been an official music video clip, don't you think?
Look, I not only is it an amazing video clip, but it's just as far as a live event using virtual technology to create this new space and have her play with it is just phenomenal. And I love this clip. Love it.
And it's also, sorry, Rob, it's also a return to kind of classic Katy Perry sound. She went off the rails there a little bit with her last album, but this now sounds like the good stuff that she can really, really do. I'm very excited about her new album.
And look, there was just a bit of feedback from Terry. She says, Katy is probably the most honest talker we've ever seen as a public figure. And that's probably not a bad point. Her and Taylor Swift are very honest in their interviews.
You know what's funny, though, Robbo, is that last album that Katy Perry released was my favourite album and everyone hated it. And I was like, what is wrong with me?
No, it's all good, buddy. It's all good.
What else have we got,
And
mate?
also... Well, not moving too far away from American Idol, Ryan Seacrest has found himself a little under fire. A lot of people were saying or worried that he'd had a stroke.
Franklin, along with our top 11, it's Cynthia Erivo. Cynthia Erivo and the top 11 right there. Catch her playing Aretha Franklin.
Certainly doesn't look well, does he?
If you look at him, though, what people have noticed is that not only is he sort of slurring, but one of his eyes is a lot bigger than the other one. So, you know, look, he is doing the show from home, and his representation have come out saying that he had not had a stroke, and it's just the pressures of hosting a live show from his isolation, being that he's doing that from home. It is a lot of pressure to do live TV from home. I think you guys know this. But a lot of people were actually drawing a big comparison.
All he has to do is present. We're switching a whole show here. We're creating something like this from our garage. You know, like, sorry.
He would have like armies of
Ryan
producers.
Seacrest.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if I can get one of my eyes to go bigger than the other one while I do the entertainment report. Look, a lot of people were talking about Serene Branso, who actually has a very famous viral video clip from when she apparently also had a stroke on live TV. We have that clip right now.
Well, a very, very heavy debatation tonight. We had a very Darrison, but let's go to Terry's and look for the bit. They have the pit.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how I present the news pretty much, the entertainment news pretty much every day. Just, getting a little bit tongue-tied. And then, look, moving on, very excited for this one. Jurassic World 3 will be coming out next year. They did get a couple of weeks into production with the new Jurassic, and I'm very excited about it coming out. But look, the guys, here we have a little clip now of all of the best parts of the Jurassic movies. But Sam Neill is back home in Australia, and he just recently was talking to Fitzy and Whipper about production and how far they managed to get. Now, it is believed that they got 2 weeks into production before Sam Neill was able to come back home to Australia. But very excited about this. A poster has just come out for the new Jurassic World, so you should be able to check out that poster. Do we have that poster now? I'm not necessarily sure if we've got it.
No, we don't, mate. We didn't. No, we didn't.
Well, that's my fault. And I'm just going to quickly finish.
We do have the grab where they're talking about it.
Okay.
We're in the fridge for the time being.
Okay. Did you get any filming done at all, Sam?
Yes, they got 2 weeks done. I was waiting in London for my stuff to start.
Yeah.
And then it became apparent it was going to close down a day or two, and I got on the Qantas flight to Perth as soon as I could, and I made it as far as Sydney, and then got into the quarantine thing. But no, we'll start up as soon as we.
Well, I tell you what, Sam Neill's one of the funniest people I've ever interviewed. I interviewed him a couple of years ago at the Logies, and I said to him, would he ever do another Jurassic Park film? And he said, what have they got left to do? They've already done everything. I'd only go back if the dinosaurs wore pajamas. So maybe this one we'll get to see them wearing some pajamas. And just finishing off the entertainment, today's TikTok of the day has something that has gone completely viral. It is a parent fail with everyone trying to make these TikTok videos, but these parents have got their kids to make this very impressive video that goes horribly wrong. Check it out.
You ready? 3, 2, 1. Oh no!
Is that a footballer on a Saturday night?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a little bit worried about that. Quickly, Ben, back to the Jurassic Park stuff. I'm very excited that he's back because obviously he hasn't been back for a long time. Laura Dern and Jeff Goldblum, they're also back, I think. Is that right?
That is correct. They have got the 3 main returning cast members back to the new Jurassic World. It is now recently revealed that it looks like the 2 children from the first Jurassic Park may be coming back as well, with Ariana Richards posting a photo of what she looks like now. Interestingly enough, the actor that played Tim in the first Jurassic ended up in Bohemian Rhapsody, and no one really drew the comparison because obviously he looks a lot different now. But look, I think it's a return back to the original Jurassic films, tying it all back together. And while I wasn't a big fan of Fallen Kingdom, the last one, I feel like this one being directed by Colin Trevorrow is going to be good. Yeah, you excited, Robbo?
Yeah, I agree with you. The last one that we just saw wasn't very good. The first one of the new series was amazing. So I'm glad that Colin Trevorrow is back, and I think we're going to see a wonderful film again. I can't wait for it.
Laura Dern. I am obsessed with Laura Dern.
We can't hear Rob now. Rob, we can't hear you.
Rob, no.
It's because I keep hitting the wrong button. I have button issues.
I've heard that's a problem.
I think I'm going to have to reorganize my buttons here because I keep going for the middle one and I'm turning myself off, not turning myself on. Awkward. All right.
I just thought I'd leave you out there to dry for a little bit there, Rob.
No,
Sorry.
I appreciate that. All right. Look, it's time to cut through the spin with our very own numbers man, Sam Dastiari. Hello, Sam. How are you today?
Great to be back.
Always good to have you here. Look, I want to start off with our tariff war against China. We called for an inquiry into how the coronavirus started, and all of a sudden China is banning our exports and putting huge tariffs on Australian products. But Agricultural Minister David Littleproud has insisted there's no trade war with China. Here he is on Sky News.
There's no need for a trade war. We can work through in a fair marketplace. We produce the best food and fibre in the world. We can put ours on the marketplace and get a premium for that if we're given a fair go, and that's all we're asking for. We won't be retaliating. That won't advance not only agriculture, won't advance any of our sectors. We'll keep to our principles. That's what the Australian government does. That's what the Australian people do. They stick to our principles, show that we're good global citizens and get on with the job.
Gee, Sam, it smells like a trade war. It looks like a trade war. Is it a trade war with China?
Of course, but look, the minister doesn't want to acknowledge that, and I actually don't blame him. I wouldn't want to acknowledge it if I was him either, because he's in this bind that the second you say this is linked to the inquiry, then it's linked to the inquiry. So everyone's starting to play this pretend game at the moment that, all of a sudden what may or may not be happening with barley, may or may not happen with a couple of beef abattoirs where had the meat kind of held up in customs, has nothing to do with calling for a coronavirus inquiry. And anyone who's anybody knows immediately, of course, the two are linked. But look, this is serious, and this is a really, really big problem. And frankly, on any definition, how the Chinese government behaved and the Communist Party behaved regarding this whole issue is worrisome. So look, there's a whole lot of conspiracy theories out there, right? And it goes from one extreme, which is this was some kind of a plant by the, Beijing government to undermine Western democracies. I think that's like on one kind of crazy extreme, and right to the other end. But even in a best case scenario, they tried to hide it. They downplayed it. Now, they may have been downplaying it for their own domestic purposes. They may have been downplaying it for more nefarious reasons. But the truth is that they did for a long time pretend there wasn't a problem, and that helped spread this virus. And now we've got this huge economic wreckage as a result.
Sam, do you think that we should be standing up against China, though? I mean, for me personally, I think it seems a little bit dangerous, but what do you think?
Yeah, look, I think we don't have a choice. I think we have to. Where we've got to be a bit careful is we have this thing as Aussies where sometimes we try and get a little bit ahead of the curve. And we're probably more exposed at a trade level with China than really almost any other nation. You've got this funny scenario where China is Australia's largest, export market by double. It's double the size of the second largest export market. It's the US, and then Japan slightly after that. So we're hugely exposed, and you end up with this funny situation where, I'll give you an example. We start saying tough talk on the coronavirus, on this inquiry. The Americans egg us on and say, you got to do it, you have to do it. US senators start writing these letters. They all kind of sign them together in solidarity with Australia. They suddenly start saying, oh yeah, we're going to, some kind of payback with barley exports. And who's the people who are going to benefit from that? Probably some of the American farmers. You've got to be a little bit careful that you don't get played for suckers in these kinds of games. Because, the same thing happens. If suddenly Australian beef stops being able to get into China, they're still going to eat meat. They're going to buy it from somewhere else, and I wouldn't be too surprised if they don't start buying it from American farms.
So have we been played, Sam? It does feel like we're being pushed to be the people to stand up, and we're copying all the financial cutbacks because of it.
Look, no, I think the government, and again, it pains me to say this, I think they've actually played this as well as they could to the extent they have. I mean, you have to stand up for your values. You have to stand up for your principles on this stuff. And again, putting aside the crazy conspiracy theories, right, that, this is some kind of a plant by the Beijing government, which I don't think anyone really believes, they have behaved appallingly. Where we're in this really weird... Look, Australia's in this really weird situation because historically, our largest trading partner and our largest ally were always the same people, right? Now, whether that was the Americans or whether that was the British, it's pretty easy where your geopolitical interests are aligned with your trading partners. We're in this kind of funny situation now where they're not aligned. And other countries have dealt with these scenarios often. Like Japan and Russia have this incredibly close trade relationship because neither of them remotely trust each other. Where Australia's kind of, for us, it's a little bit odd because I think it's part of the Aussie character. We like to be liked and we like to be popular and we want to be friends with everyone. And for us, it's a bit strange having these incredibly important commercial relationships with people whose values aren't necessarily aligned with ours.
I think it's a very good point. Quickly, Morrison is doing really, really well. The government is kicking goals in the opinion polls. In the primary vote, it's 43 to 35 in the coalition's favour. It's a closer race in the two-party preferred. But Morrison, when it comes to preferred Prime Minister, is sitting way ahead of Albanese. Has Morrison got over, one, the setback he was getting during the bushfires, and will the voters forgive him as we get closer to the polls and as financial hardships come in as a result of what we've had to do because of the coronavirus?
Yeah. Okay. Really, really good question. Some really good points there. Yes, the bushfires are forgotten. That was a lifetime ago. That doesn't matter. This is, a tsunami's hit us. So anything that happened before that is now kind of irrelevant, meaningless. It's not what it was. So park all of that. This was a huge reset for them and for the government. Look, there's obviously a kind of rally behind the flag mentality that happens whenever there's some kind of a crisis, and that's what we've experienced at the moment. Whether this will last or not, that's the really interesting question, because it's actually a really hard argument for governments to make, which is, we saved you from a really bad crisis. And I saw all the polling when, in some ways when Rudd was in power and the Rudd-Gillard governments, remember the GFC happening in 2009, Australia largely was able to avoid it, right? The GFC, we call it the GFC, the global financial crisis. The Americans call it the great, the recession, the depression, even the language is different, because for us, it's this thing that happened elsewhere in the world. For them, it's this event that affected them. So while that all happened, we got to the election, and it was actually a really hard sell to tell people, oh, look, we stopped something bad happening to you. Like, people,
I never got this. I think the coalition played an amazing game against Labor. They got us through a recession, and Australians still voted for the opposition to take over government because the coalition sold the Australian people on the fact that Rudd had stuffed it up. I still cannot believe to this day how the coalition pulled that off.
Well, look, and don't forget, there's always the famous story is always that, Churchill won the war and lost the election. Straight after the Second World War, Churchill lost the election, and Clement Attlee ran that campaign slogan that was, he might have won the war, but I can win the peace. So, look, nothing's forever, right? I think you'd definitely rather be Morrison with Morrison's numbers than not. Make no mistake. But one thing that's so sure about Australian politics, and you mentioned this point about how close the 2PP and that the two-party preferred, how close it is. It's Australian elections are always run at the centre, and that's a huge difference between our system and the American system that everyone compares it to, is that because we have compulsory voting, because you have to vote in Australian elections, we always have this joke in polling sense that we always say that Australian elections are won and lost by people who vote to avoid a fine.
And on that note, Sam, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you for your insight as always.
Thank
we
you.
will see you next week.
See you next week.
It's the red light shot of the day. Where are you going today? You'll never know where you'll end up with the red light shot of the day.
This afternoon we're taking you to London, where it is early morning over there. It's a partly cloudy day, a low of 12 degrees and a high of 25 as they wake up on the other side of the world. How fabulous. I could watch that all morning, all afternoon, all night, but we won't. We've got other things to do. Well, our next guest is a guy who has been at the forefront of podcasting, created a short film which went viral around the world, and he also hosts a weekly TV show for SBS. Mark Vanel, is there anything you can't do?
Microphone on. And
well,
action.
I guess he can't be here for a internet crowd. Oh,
But
no.
I think that
Oh,
we could just
that's
get Robbo to do some
terrible.
sports rorts, or, you know.
You know what? We were going so well, and Mark's had problems coming in and out, but I can see him. Mark, I just asked. Oh, he's gone again. Oh, let's bring him in on the foreshot, Amanda, and just see where this goes. I think he's... Is he there?
Oh, here we go.
System works! I owe you an apology because I did this thing because actually what I've done here is I've actually tethered my laptop to my phone because the office I'm in puts you against the firewall, and of course I did that thing immediately before I go on air, which is I hit bloody airline mode, and so I'm trying to be a good interview guest, and in fact I just ruined it. So, and I forgot my earpods. I look like bloody Princess Leia. I'm sorry. Lovely to be here with you. Congratulations on your show.
Thank you very much. I'm talking you up big time, but wow, you've missed it. You're supposed to be the internet guy, the guy who knows how to do it. Ah, disappointed.
No. You invited a moron on your show, and only now are you realising it.
But I'm just thankful, to be honest, that it was you who stuffed up and not me. So that's a nice change. Mark, you host the feed on SBS, and it really has been a groundbreaking show, hasn't it?
I think, firstly, thank you. Lovely of you to say that. It's one of those things where, we started it in 2013 back on what was SBS 2, and then what became SBS Viceland, and now we're on the main channel. And I think what has surprised me is how much the show has grown, and the incredible talent that the show has put out as well. I think of people like Mark Humphreys, of Jan Fran, and I think if anything, that's what I'm most proud of. It's the fact that we've been able to create a space where particularly young talent has been able to come along and build their careers and grow. And also just the internet. One of the interesting things about being on, let's be honest, one of the tiniest broadcasters is that we were actually capable of finding an audience on the internet, and certainly social media and Facebook, and before they changed the algorithm in particular, was a really powerful way for us to find audiences. And I remember years ago I did a show for the AEST called Hunt, and I worked for Andrew Denton, and he had this saying, which is the best, doesn't matter how big your audience is, good ideas find a way. And in some ways the feed has sort of proven that the comedy that we've done, the documentaries, the interviews, they've found this amazing life on the internet. And I guess groundbreaking, thank you. But what matters to me most is that the stuff we've worked on has managed to find an audience despite, the platform that we may have had.
Well, look, a story you produced for the feed called Sex in Japan, Dying for Company. This thing has had over 6 million views. Did you know you were onto something with this story?
Can I tell you a funny story about that? So I was in Japan to shoot an interview with a musician, and producer Claire Aird was coming along, and she found a bunch of interviews attached to it that she thought were worth exploring. And what actually came out of it is we made this documentary in 3 days. We made a half-hour documentary in 3 days. And
that's pretty
about a day and a half, we were racing around Tokyo, and I remember thinking after a day, some of this stuff is amazing, and I haven't actually seen this before. And I think what was amazing for me is being able to watch people in Japan come back and comment on that documentary and go, you know what? We actually hadn't seen the stories before. And I think that's always an amazing compliment. A lot of my job involves basically traveling around the world and telling stories in other parts of the globe. And when people from that part of the world come back and say, actually, you didn't screw it up and you really got it, that's probably one of the best compliments. So I think one of the great joys about being on a network that is so globally focused, and, recently we won an award at the New York festivals for our documentary that we did during the Hong Kong protests. And I think what was really, which is obviously lovely, but I think what was really powerful was being able to see people in Hong Kong comment saying, actually, you really got what this conflict was about and you managed to convey it clearly. And you always have to remember, you never have very long to make these films. You're really only there for a couple of days. And so being able to step into an environment and pass some logic from it is one of the great joys of being a television producer. It's problem solving all the time.
You did an amazing job, but for people who haven't seen the documentary, and it's well worth a look, that has captured the attention of so many people, let's take a look at the opening scene.
in Japan, almost half of unmarried people under the age of 34 are virgins, like actual virgins. In fact, the vast majority aren't in any kind of relationships, and it's actually a huge problem. The population is in decline. The number of kids that were born hit record lows. In fact, it's such an ageing population that the number of adult diapers is about to outsell babies' diapers. So, the lack of sex in Japan has been blamed on a whole bunch of things. Porn, anime, robots, of course, it's always robots. But what if sex itself isn't the main issue here? What if it's just the symptom of a much bigger problem?
Amazing work, Mark. What is it like when the world notices something like this that you've created?
It is humbling and it's lovely. I think it's been interesting. Like, I did a podcast series for Audible last year called It Burns, which pretty much took place in Australia, the US, and the UK. And I remember the day when I got an email from Audible saying you'd gone to #1 in the US on the Audible charts in America and on fixed charts. I just remember being like, it reminded me that there really isn't a barrier. If I think people around the world, generally speaking, like Australians, and I think we approach the world with an open heart and an open mind. I think we don't carry a lot of baggage. And I think that puts us one of the other interesting things about being a person like me traveling around the world is I don't look like your traditional idea of what a journalist is or what an Australian looks like either. I mean, particularly in America, they really do expect us to all look like Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm working on it. But I don't look like what they expect in terms of this part. And I think that helps a lot. I'm good at I think I'm okay, maybe, at stepping into worlds I don't normally belong and just asking really genuine questions and seeing where that takes you. And it's really gratifying both in terms of audience numbers and also awards and accolades that people are responding to that. It is interesting that we tend to do better, particularly for awards, we tend to do better at overseas awards than we do at Australian ones, which I don't know what to put that down to, but it's lovely nonetheless.
Maybe you're pigeonholed as not a real journalist because you haven't done A, B or C, but what you are doing at the feed is truly extraordinary. And you do that thing that not a lot of journalists do, where you actually listen to what the person's saying and you react to them. So that's a really important skill that you've got. And look, you've really found a home at SBS and you really seem to be their go-to man. I mean, you even got to fill in for Jennifer Burns hosting Mastermind, for goodness sake.
Well, it was funny because, and at the moment I'm filling in for Jenny Brockie on Insight. I think, right. Look, if your name's Jenny, I'm coming for you. No, kidding. Jen hurt herself so they were very early in the production of the first series of Mastermind, and Jen, actually, I think she broke her arm. And they sort of brought me into a room and went, we actually can't pause production. We need to keep producing. And I had never really, it's funny because I've actually been approached over the years a few times about hosting game shows on other networks.
Really?
And for one reason or another, it's never come to fruition. And the funny thing about my career is had never, I had never had a plan beyond Triple J, and everything that sort of happened after that has been about taking opportunities and working out ways to sort of make them work for you. And so when they said to you, like, can you please fill in to do a couple of weeks worth of Mastermind, I was like, sure, because if you don't say yes, you don't know where this stuff's going to go. So I was very, very lucky that people didn't hate it. And it was surprising that people didn't hate it when I did it too.
What is it like? I've got to ask you, the game shows that you were talking about, what is it like being approached, and what game shows did you turn down or it didn't happen? What were you meant to host?
Well, it didn't happen, and it was a very famous, iconic Australian game show that they were looking to reboot. Nope, wasn't Family Feud. It never got made. In fact, I'm not sure it ever even got to pilot stage. But I remember when I got a call from Fremantle. I'll let you can do the math, you can work the rest of that out. And I remember just sitting in a meeting, and I had this lovely meeting with them, and I was just like, I can't see it, but they could, but it never ended up going. And look, those conversations happen often. I think I expected them to, and it's some exercise in just imagination. Like, can you see yourself doing those things? And if you can't, then you've got to work out whether that's something you can do week in, week out. And those shows, they pump out a lot of content in a week. It is work to make them engaging, and yet still fit the form. So I'm hugely respectful of people that do game shows, but for one reason or another,
Mark, I'm going to bring in Robbo and Ben here because we're going to work this out. Is it blankety blanks?
No.
Sale of the century. Oh no!
Sale of the century.
It never happened.
You would be great at doing sale of the century. Oh, I love that
I
idea.
think you would be fantastic as well. Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? I was just grateful to be somebody to sound me out. I wasn't even asked. Somebody sounded me out.
Well, that is fantastic. Hey, look, you can catch the feed every Tuesday at 10 p.m. on SBS. Mark, thank you so much. That's going on the TV Black Box website before you even get off this interview.
You know, it already.
I can see the word exclusive already. That brings us to the end of the Ben, Rob and Robbo Show. We will see you tomorrow at 1 p.m.
It's the Ben, Rob and Robbo, Ben, Rob and Robbo, Ben, Rob and Robbo Show.